Welcome everyone. Well, we're in the home of turquoise and copper deposits, so I'm going to take you on a quick journey through time and place and hopefully share some information that you're not familiar with. So turquoise is one of our longest standing gem materials. It's been considered a precious stone since for probably over 7,000 or 8,000 years. The name turquoise comes from a word meaning Turkish stone because it's thought that that was the origin, at least, of when it was first called by a common name. Ancient Egypt is thought to be the earliest deposits of turquoise. A lot of the mines were long since depleted. However, in the past 2 years, there is a lot of Egyptian turquoise on the market again. So we'll take a look at that in a few minutes. There was actually a temple for turquoise, and the priestess was the turquoise of priesthood and basically was adorned in that nice robin's egg color, dating back over 2,000 years before Christ. The light green color represented fertility and vegetation, so it was highly revered and was one of the more or less crown jewels of the pharaohs. It wasn't until about 1000 BC that we saw other turquoise in the trade routes, and it was probably from Iran. This is the largest, oldest artifact that we have symbolizing turquoise. Almost all of the smaller beads are turquoise in some way, shape, or form. This was, of course, excavated from some of the tombs at an early time. Of course, the death mask of Tutankhamun. Most of this is gold and enamel, but the lower collar was actually embellished with turquoise, lapis, quartz, feldspar, and carnelian. And again, it was highly revered during this time. So museum collections. I'm currently building out a new museum for the University of Arizona in the historic Pima County Courthouse building. So when you come back next year, you can come and pay us a visit. And of course, a lot of these earlier artifacts were kind of visually identified as turquoise. So we see something and it looks like it's this color, and we just assume since it was old, it was turquoise. These were both actually identified as beryl or aquamarine. Turns out they were feldspar and turquoise. So again, I mentioned that Egyptian turquoise, nice dark blue, lots of veining, very popular over the past couple of years. I've just got a few relative values. I just pulled stones at random from different localities because a lot of times we equate value in turquoise from where they're from, particularly historic mines in the Southwest. So this is just to give you a relative idea. So we often talk about gem materials as precious versus semi-precious. If you were mining in the Sinai of Egypt and your turquoise deposit mined out, it would take you 609 hours walk to get to the Iranian turquoise mine. So I think that's pretty precious in my mind. Persian turquoise, this is the longest continuously mined material. Over 2,000 years as a primary source, continuing to this day. Earliest records go back over 6,000 years. Again, we talked about this being part of the Silk Road and the spice trade during early trade and travel. And of course, robin's egg blue. We all equate that with turquoise and with value. We'll see how that term progresses as we get into the Americas. Some representative colors, and of course, we put a robin's egg nest in the middle just for reference. I used to carry one around with me, but it didn't last through the travels. But typically known as not veined, pretty much homogeneous colored material. And the Iranians particularly like this for overlay and inlay. They mix it in a lot of jewelry pieces as sort of rough fragmented material And they utilize it not only with gold or silver, but they do a lot with copper and brass and bronze overlays as well. And this continues to this day in the Middle Eastern regions. So even in early times, the Persians had 3 grades of turquoise. The finest was always used for rings, and then there were a couple other qualities as well, depending on whether they were mixed with green overtones or how much matrix material was mixed in there. And of course, the robin's egg blue was the most valuable and is to this day. So again, we've had a lot of legend surrounding turquoise in many, many cultures. So I thought it was interesting just to look at this. It was believed to prevent the owner from falling off of his or her horse. So I think that's where in modern times, cowboys and cowgirls like to wear turquoise because they think it'll help keep them centered on the horse. It was also believed to be a sign of a wife's infidelity if the color kind of faded over time. Not going to testify to any of that. It was also thought to bring luck and protect against evil, and also the possibility that as a person aged in life, it would fade over time and maybe lose all of the color at the time of death. And in a new owner's hands, the color would be restored. This is actually one of my favorite pieces in the Smithsonian, Napoleon, the Crown Jewels. We know crown jewels were often shifted from country to country and occasionally sold to finance war or to bring them out of trillion-dollar debts. And so is true with the emerald tiara that Napoleon the first gifted to his wife. And it was sold to Van Cleef and Arpels, and they took all of the emeralds out and reset them in jewelry and sold them. The leftover tiara with all the diamonds was then set with fine Persian turquoise and found its way into the collection at the Smithsonian. And I'd just as soon have that as the Hope Diamond. But if you're there, pay particular attention because it's a fabulous piece. Mining continues to this day, as we mentioned. There is some spider web pattern, but typically it's not as revered. And the constant theme you're going to see throughout this presentation is this looks a lot like some of the Egyptian we saw at the beginning. So how can you tell it apart? Maybe you can't. Maybe you can. Again, just showing a difference in price. We've got a lighter stone without webbing, a little higher price, a darker stone with webbing, a little lower price. So it's really just a matter of personal preference. And the nice thing about turquoise, there's all different shades, even leaning into the greens and yellows. China also has a long history of turquoise, dating back about 4,000 years as well. This one is an overlay mask, a ceremonial mask. And most commonly it was traded for the longest period of time with other countries. Turquoise had huge deposits. Turquoise was never really, the Chinese always revered stones that could be carved. They weren't as interested in jewelry materials, and of course jade being the preference, turquoise a little bit later. Recently, as far back as maybe 20 years ago, there was a huge influx of Chinese turquoise in the United States market. You'd come to the Tucson gem shows, it was very reasonable. It was very beautiful material, and it seemed that the market was flooded. It didn't take many years to when the Chinese traders came back to the United States trying to buy all they could back up at much lower prices. It's also been said that Chinese buyers were responsible for buying up all of the last production out of the Sleeping Beauty mine in Arizona once it shut down, basically trying to stockpile all of this stone that has now become popular. Wide range of color, particularly known for the spider webbing pattern, the tight pattern with nice delineated lines throughout there. No currently producing mines in China that we know of. A lot of the material was stabilized, and a lot of times, no matter what the source of turquoise, we want to shy away from stabilized material. And a turquoise buyer one time told me sometimes it's a difference between having a stabilized stone that stays intact or a natural one that might fall apart. So just because it's stabilized, don't feel like it's not as good a stone. It's going to be a lot more durable, most likely, for wearing and everyday use. And of course, I got excited and told you that it's a popular stone now, depleting, and caused the price to jump 5 times in 2 years. This is very characteristic of Chinese material, very beautiful, very dark color, and as I said, those nice banding lines throughout. Tibetan turquoise is very revered. I think a lot of what we see on the market today would be questionable whether it really was from Tibet or not. It's very hard to ascertain origin unless you have a provenance line dating all the way back. These deposits were probably mined out very early, and a lot of what we see in ethnic beads today is probably from other localities. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing. They would paint their deities the color of turquoise, so the gods that they worshipped were always depicted as being turquoise blue. Goddesses were born out of turquoise eggs, probably robin's eggs to be exact. And they wore headdresses. Again, we've got the fertility that we saw in Egypt has now gone through to Tibet. It was classed as one of the 5 precious substances on Earth, and again, a lot of the historic jewelry, also coral, gold, silver, and pearl. You would see these all intermixed in the designs of the day. A lot more green in these, so nickel accounts for a green tint. It's a little bit different than the blue caused by copper. It was mined in the Himalayas, brought from the heavens above. It's been very important for about 3,000 years. Again, children were given turquoise to keep them from falling. Maybe they didn't have a horse, but it would keep them stable either way. And again, beautiful lighter blues, blue-greens into pure greens. A lot of times we see turquoise being marketed based on its color. So the greens, you know, we might call Tibetan, whether they've ever been to Tibet or not. The robin's egg blue we would equate with either Sleeping Beauty or Persia, and we really can't know for sure. So a very important fact, turquoise earring would prevent you from coming back as a donkey, and I think that's pretty important. It would ensure a safe journey, best of luck. If it turned green, you might have hepatitis, and it might draw out the jaundice. And it was believed to absorb sin. How great is that? I do have one in my pocket. I'll let you know how that works. Again, every one of these cultures, you notice, has a grading system for how good a quality the material was, which is very innovative for these early times. Of course, we know they all had gem materials as well, but they were never classified like turquoise was. So I find that quite interesting. And again, a representative piece with the veining, and again, a little bit more green because of nickel in the chemical structure. The Americas, we know there was South American material dating back almost 3,000 years as well. And of course, the Middle Valley of Mexico, the Aztecs and the Mixtecs, it was a very important stone to them for ornamentation. Arizona, New Mexico, we actually have a fashion pendant that we'll be showing in our museum next year that dates to 1000 AD from Tucson. Tucson has civilization dating back 4,000 years above Tumamoc Hill. So we don't often think of having this ancient culture in the United States, but it was certainly there. Of course, New Mexico, Chaco Canyon, one of the earlier civilizations there. 100,000 pieces of turquoise were excavated and absolutely no turquoise deposits anywhere nearby. Again, a ceremonial mask. And then American turquoise. So we know that we have good turquoise. There's other deposits. There's Arkansas material that you might see at the show. We had some very small trace amounts in North Carolina, where I was from, near the copper veins. But this is typically what we think of as American turquoise, basically the states of the Southwest and Mexico. Arizona, the value of the production, the two long-lasting mines were Sleeping Beauty and Kingman. They produced over hundreds of years. The values were very high for the material. It was typically very hard material, and some of the veins that were found didn't require any stabilization. They would actually take polish and were almost like a silica-based material. They really held up well. And it's been mined here. Typically copper mines, this was a byproduct, and the mines would often, if they hit a seam of turquoise, allow people to come in the evening to excavate out the turquoise veins and then market the turquoise. So that was subcontracted out. Kingman still has production in turquoise to this day, and it's still beautiful material, and it's not cheap. Of course, Bisbee, our most well-known copper mine. This is a particularly nice piece. You see at the top there's some reddish color, which is cuprite, the mineral cuprite, which is also a copper-bearing mineral. And this is characteristic of Bisbee. If you see some of that reddish veining through there, metallic luster, there's a very high likelihood that it's Bisbee material. This was all found in the open pit, if you ever visit Bisbee, called the Lavender Pit, and it was only found for a couple of years' time. There was just one seam of turquoise where the conditions for the material to form happened. Kingman, as I mentioned, this is also characteristic of Kingman. You don't see it all the time, but the current production, the areas where they're mining, are very tiny little round sphericals interlaced with a black matrix, and very often with pyrite mixed in. So pyrite is very typical at Kingman. It can also come from Morenci and other areas, but it gives you kind of a first shot. If you had to guess, it's probably Kingman. So there's been a lot of controversy over the years about white turquoise. The chemical formula for turquoise has copper in it, and copper causes the blue color, and this material does not have copper in it, so therefore it's not turquoise. It is found in the same deposits. It's very attractive. It sells not quite as high as turquoise does. It's typically harder because it has more quartz matrix in it, and it does have a lot of similarities to it. I was talking to one of the miners in Nevada who mines white horse. In the same pit in the ground, in one wall he'll find turquoise, another wall he'll find white horse, and another wall he'll find lime green variscite. So they are very commonly associated minerals in some deposits, primarily Nevada for white buffalo and white horse in Arizona. This comes off the Indian reservation up above Predating Mesa. Sleeping Beauty, if you look at this, can you tell it from Persian turquoise? I'm going to say no, you can't, unless you're really, really good, and I'm not sure what that means. But you can see it's very, very similar. It really brings a higher price, particularly in the United States, because we like United States mined gem materials. It rivals the Persian, I think, in every way. But again, no longer producing, and can you really separate the two once it's been cut and polished? it's going to be difficult. New Mexico was the largest producing, so Arizona was the highest value for the production. New Mexico had the largest quantity. A lot of these mines date back to primitive civilizations, and indigenous people were digging this out and trading it in other areas for other things. A lot of it was in seams and nuggets, so it was a little bit different look. And there were some very high quality deposits found. Pretty much now everything that's found is from the dump site, so there's really no current production from New Mexico at this time. Again, a lot of spider webbing and New Mexican material as well. A full range of color from dark emerald green to the lightest blues and the darkest, most intense blues. So probably the most variety of any state production. Nevada, again, a very large producer. It was one of the largest producing mines until they were pretty much depleted. There were the largest number of mines in Nevada, and there's still prospecting going on there and a lot of artisanal mining. There's actually someone at AGTA that mines, I think, 6 different claims in Nevada with some beautiful material. And the production range was estimated to be $40 to $50 million, so certainly not an insignificant mining product as well. Again, a full range of colors. The iron and the nickel can give us greens and yellow greens. And some of the best material was as good as any in the world. It just was not that much material available in those really high grades. So Battle Mountain, again, I've got a piece of Sleeping Beauty on the table that looks exactly like that. So again, it's very hard to separate them out. Which one? Not for sale. Landers Blue, this is beautiful material, very dark matrix and very bright robin's egg blue scattered without, so it makes it very attractive. Landers Blue, there was one pocket found that was beautifully spider webbed, and that material can sell for $500 to $700 a carat for turquoise. As you can see, this one $180 a carat. So it's really known to be probably the most valuable turquoise ever on the market. Fox, again, very reminiscent of robin's egg. And then the lime greens. The black matrix white buffalo that we spoke about earlier. Still beautiful material. And even brown. These are the seams we talked about. So the matrix material on the far left with a thin seam of turquoise in the middle, and it's really quite attractive. It's almost reminiscent of boulder opal. So the whole time I've been talking, I've told you how hard it is to separate out visually, because there's so much variation even within a deposit. And about 3 or 4 years ago, we had a grad student here at the U of A that was looking at these Aztec workings and trying to separate out by isotope analysis. And it was always thought that the Aztecs were mining were trading with Arizona and New Mexico. And yet, when we started looking at these isotopes, it didn't match. So they were able to separate all of the Sleeping Beauty, all of the Kingman, 2 localities in New Mexico and 1 in Nevada, chemically, and they all fit within the boundaries. When they looked at these tiles, it didn't match. So they went and looked at other copper-bearing minerals in the region of the Aztecs and found that the copper isotopes matched exactly. So they knew that there had to be turquoise deposits in southeastern Mexico where the Aztecs lived that were depleted. They just are no more. So it's opened this up for origin determination, if you will, but there are ways to look at turquoise chemically and analytically. And when we start getting into pricing schemes like the Landers, where it's maybe $700 a carat, it has some potential down the road. So turquoise characteristics, you have to be careful setting it. A lot of the Native American jewelers would know exactly how to do this. Otherwise, you could burn the turquoise or cause the color to alter. And also, as we mentioned earlier, by having stabilized material, turquoise is porous no matter what. So any of your body oils or lotions can change the color and affect the value of turquoise. A lot of chemical stuff going on here, just if you're out in the field and want to test for turquoise. Treatments, so as we mentioned, it can be impregnated with resins to make it more stable. It can also be dyed, so dyeing is not quite so good because you can take anything that's porous of poor color and make it appear very, very nice. So again, disclosure is very good when we're looking at that. The synthetics can be a little challenging at times. We don't see too much of it on the market today. We do see a lot of composite material, and I brought some along. The block on the table, you can see the individual chunks of turquoise that were too small to cut by themselves, and they're basically mixed with resin and compressed into bricks. Each of those little individual pieces is a solid nugget of turquoise. So it's not bad material, and it gives you a very attractive appearance. There's other material where it's basically just turquoise dust that's been compressed and done the same way. That's not going to be overly stable and to me doesn't make sense as a material for jewelry. And then there's also things like howlite and magnesite, which are white, like the white horse, that have been dyed and impregnated. Again, it's very inexpensive, and if you go to a lot of the tent shows, you'll see mountains of this blue-green material. I brought a little selection over on this side, and they typically sell for $2 to $10 a strand. That's a pretty good indication you're not getting Sleeping Beauty. So the Egyptians were known for making fayances, and it was an earthenware clay, and a lot of those were dyed with materials that they had handy to imitate turquoise. Those would be quite valuable if you had an ancient one, but the modern ones are really not worth a lot. But you can see almost everything that is porous or plastic could be used as an imitation turquoise. We talked about impregnating just a little bit. And then coral. We're not doing coral, are we? No. Okay, that is it for this one. Any questions? Microphone? I remembered the first time, but I won't remember again. So.
What do you think of the new pieces from Kazakhstan that are very light blue?
I really like the Kazakhstan material. I bought some last year. There's some samples up here. It's lighter than robin's egg blue, but it has beautiful matrix to it, and some of that material too is very hard, and so it makes very nice jewelry. It's beautiful.
So the white horse and the white buffalo, is that like their species name? I mean, if they're not turquoise, is that what they are?
They're in the magnesite howlite family, but the brown is more of a matrix siltstone material. But again, it's beautiful stuff and it's very durable, so there's no issues with it. But let's just don't call it turquoise.
in a sense of like sheer volume of how much quality rough is extricated from the United States, how does it compare to the rest of the world?
So the Chinese deposits were the biggest overall, but I would say, and you know, you've got material from Iran that's been dug for 2,000 years, so it's hard to catch up with that. But as far as production, I would say probably in the 70s and 80s, the United States was a leader in production, probably shifted in the 90s to 2000 to China. And I think the Persian deposits would have been fairly constant over time, but surely turquoise from Persia would have probably been the most produced. I've never seen figures because a lot of it dates back so many years there was no records made.
Yeah, comparable. Thank you.
Here in AGTA Hall, last year and the year before, we have seen bright green turquoise. They told it's from Turkmenistan. Is that true? Have you seen that before?
So it would have been from the region of Turkey and Iran. It could be, sure, absolutely.
It's like the matrix green, but pure green, no matrix.
It's possible, yeah. I mean, anything's really possible in these deposits. There could be solid colors, there could be, a nice vein, and then it's going to just, pretty much any of this type material, it's the colors based on the impurities that are in the chemical structure. So a little iron or nickel, you'll get more greens, and if there's a lot of material, a lot of elements mixed in there, then it could be a lot more vibrant. It's really the same way to think about something like aquamarine. We have some that's pale and it only has a little bit of trace elements. We've got vibrant blue and it's got a whole lot of trace elements. So it's the same with these deposits as well. Yes, ma'am.
I bought one piece from a lady in this show, turquoise from Arkansas. Also, it was stabilizing. Sorry, I'm original from Iran, Tehran. My English is not the first language, so sorry for your inconvenience. Also, I have some general knowledge about Persian turquoise. I had presentation in GIA chapter DC 3 weeks ago about turquoise from Neyshabur mine, Egyptian, American, and Chinese turquoise. So I asked the lady what kind of turquoise undergoes. She said nothing. I said nothing? She said yes, just stabilizing. I said so it's not natural turquoise. Why they considered stabilizing is not treatment for turquoise?
So
it's treated.
Yes, stabilizing, if you do anything to any gem material other than cut and polish it, can I say that's a treatment? I think I can.
Yes, yes, it's treated.
Because the reason we treat things is to enhance color, enhance stability, and with turquoise, the softer material, if it's not stabilized, is going to fall apart. And again, for me personally, I see no problem with having stabilized material. Color is another thing. I feel there's enough good material out there that you shouldn't have to buy dyed and colored turquoise.
Naturally, there is a rough turquoise with good color, but a little bit those are chalky. So they need stabilizing.
It does.
They do it with kind of resin. No one say the chemical of resins is secret for, artisan.
Yes.
So, but in my point of view, when turquoise undergo to any treatment, it's not 100% natural.
Correct.
Yeah.
You are absolutely correct.
Yeah.
So that brings up an interesting point. As I pointed out, you can have this material right here has solid turquoise that's been pressed and stabilized in a resin with a little bit of matrix mixed in to make it attractive. To me, this does not have the same value as the chalky material you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's also been treatments in the past where they use heat and pressure to stabilize. The best turquoise merchants out there basically stabilize their turquoise at room temperature by immersion. No vacuum, no pressure, no nothing. So that's the purest form of making something stable.
Yeah.
Once you start adding heat and pressure and other things, you know, you're going up in the treatment scale and it's fully treated material.
Yeah, sure.
There's, I don't know any percentages, but in my mind, there's a very small percentage, I'm just going to say 10 or 20%,
10%.
that on its own is stable enough to cut.
Yeah. So also, if you don't mind, just it was accident, I don't know. I brought few items, turquoise, for my friend for tomorrow. We have presentation, and he needed to show it because of the different, tools that he made. So it is a good chance to show the Persian turquoise to the attendees here. If
Yeah, and I don't have any
mind.
Persian turquoise on the table, so.
You have?
Perfect, yes.
You have over there?
No turquoise. I mean, no Persian.
No Persian. I have.
Okay,
in
perfect.
My,
Look at that. I noticed when you
You're
came
lucky.
in.
So, if you don't mind, yes, I will put it over there. Thanks.
Bronco.
I'm the gentleman who will talk tomorrow. So, anyway, looking at the green gems and the technique to identify, I just also talked to Miko about different treatments. Do you know how often Zachary treatment is on the market, and is it possible to find such a stones? Because I'm looking for some for my next book on blue stones. So, if you can tell some more about Zachary treatment and how often it's done, yeah.
So Zachary treatment was popular, I don't know, 20 years ago plus. It was a proprietary stabilization where they used fairly inferior quality turquoise, and it became very hard and very stable. It is very hard to, especially in the time it hit the market, it was very hard to detect and required advanced testing from a lab like GIA. I don't know that I've seen any on the market in the past 20 years. It is one of those red flag treatments where if you've got a beautiful strand, and it also enhanced the color, not just the stability. But I know that if it's a significant piece, a lot of times the labs like GIA and AGL, people are asking specifically for that terminology, no evidence of Zachary treatment. Yes, sir.
I apologize if I'm asking something that's already been answered, but I got in a little late. So there are dealers here that have turquoise they say is natural. At what point can they have different treatments and still call it natural?
So to me, natural is no treatment.
Whatsoever, just cutting and polishing.
Cut and polish.
Okay.
Or if it's rough, rough can also be stabilized, and typically I think it's easier to see rough that's stabilized because it just looks shiny and resiny. The cutting process, you lose that appearance. But I think if you do anything to it other than cut and polish, it's a treatment that should be disclosed. The problem is a lot of this material is cut all over the world, and a lot of it's inexpensive, and they just don't go to the bother of saying what's what. But the key is whether it's been dyed or not, and if it's vein material, you can typically see concentration of dye just like you would any other way. You can also see dye with Raman. You can see polymers with FTIR, but it requires a little bit of equipment to do.
So I'm presuming it's just like any other gemstone that is susceptible to treating, like rubies, that you really just want to know your source and your vendor.
Yeah, and even then it's confusing because unless they mined it and cut it, they're depending on what someone told them, and The more down chain you are, the harder it becomes to really ascertain those things.
Yeah.
Really does. Everything on the end here is dyed or something. I've taken some of these beads. This one's actually a ceramic. It's not even mineral. This one I just bought this week, and it's funny because we were talking a little before. When you go to a tent show and you see a mountain like this and it's $3, you know it's not real. You know, there's just no luck. This was one of those that was $3, and the veining in it is so irregular and so natural looking. It's just, to me, it's sure if we chopped one up or if we studied it under the microscope, but at first glance, I could see being fooled by this, and I could see fooling others by this. So, and is there anything wrong with having a necklace that's $3 that's pretty? No, but, you know, don't go around saying this is the finest Persian turquoise from 1200 AD. So we'll cut the lights on. You guys are welcome to come take a look. If you got any other questions along the way, I'm going to cut this off so it'll quit taping this in case I start making things up.